Oh boy, do I got something special for us today. This is ridiculous. This thing is awesome. It's an X-Shot Insanity. It's like a Nerf blaster. Shoots this whole chain of Nerf, I guess X-Shot pellets, whatever, you know, those foam darts. This thing is awesome. So much cooler than like the bow and arrow I had as a kid. It's fully automatic, so you kind of push this button and you can lay down some fire, which is really cool. What's also neat is it's got this tripod stand, so you know, the kiddo doesn't really necessarily need to have to hold on to the blaster itself. They can just sit on the tripod and they can either aim it, or you can kind of just also lock it out, and then they can just hit the button and fire it. It's also got a mount that I think would be pretty easily 3D printed to make like a mount for like a chair or a table or something that's not this giant tripod. But we picked this thing up at Sam's Club. It was like, I don't know, 50 bucks, 60 bucks, something like that. So for something like this, that's a pretty darn good deal. It's a lot of fun, and we're gonna try to take it apart and see if we can adapt it. So let's get into it. If you like this video, if you found it helpful, make sure you hit the like button and hit subscribe to stay up to date on all our latest videos. Switch Adapted Toys is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is just to make play possible for kiddos of all abilities. We do that by creating these how-to videos. We have a bunch of written manuals on our website, which if you haven't checked out lately, we've got a bunch of new toys on there that we haven't made videos for. So check that out. The website's www.switchtoys.org, and we have all of our 3D printed switch buttons on there as well, so you can make and print your own switch button. Yeah, so check that out. So let's get started. I have not adapted this toy before, so this is going to kind of be a learning process as we go. We're going to start by removing all the screws on the outside of the toy. All right, so I'm going to remove the handle because that's kind of keeping the two halves together. And you kind of want to make sure you get all these screws. There are quite a bit of them. I keep finding more and more. All right, so it took me a little bit of time, but I think I finally got it separated. There we go. All right, so here's the trigger. I just took it out, but it goes right here. And what happens is when you press the trigger in, it activates this switch here, which turns on the flywheels. So those spin up, and then when you press down on the trigger, it hits this switch, which then feeds the darts into the flywheels and shoots them downrange. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna turn this switch into more of like an on-off switch. So we're gonna drill a hole in the side of the toy, install an actual on-off switch so that you can turn the flywheels on with that, and then we'll have our switch button control the switch that feeds the darts into the chamber. So we'll have a physical on-off switch for this and our switch button onto that, and then we'll try to get everything back together, and it should do it. So let's go ahead and figure out where we're going to install our on-off switch. All right, so here's my on-off switch. It's like a case-mounted switch, so I need to drill a hole that's kind of the size of this circle here, and then this will be able to go in there, and these clips will kind of keep it tight against the side of the toy, and then I'll wire this end up to that first switch that I showed you. All right, so I've got our on-off switch installed. It kind of was a pain, but I won't really bother you with showing you that because each one of these is going to be a little different. They come in a bunch of different styles. I just basically drilled a hole that size and stuck it through there, and so now we can wire that up. And I'm just going to pop this first switch out, so it makes it a little bit easier to solder it. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get some solder on these wires. It just makes it a little bit easier when I go to actually solder it to the switch. So I'm just going to heat up my solder, get kind of a glob just like that on that wire, and then we should be good. Do that for the same thing on the other wire. All right, now I can solder my wire to the switch, and I'm gonna just solder it to the same two leads that already have wires going to it. And it doesn't take much just to heat that solder up that I put on the wire to get it to stick to the lead. If you heat it up too much, you might knock off the other wire that's already on there. If that happens, it's not the end of the world. You'll need just to reattach it. But if you're kind of quick about it, it shouldn't be a problem. Alrighty, just like that. We can put this switch back into place. Alright, now I'm going to put the batteries back in it and just test it to make sure that that works before I move on. Alrighty, now I'm going to flip my switch and see if the flywheels turn on. There we go. Alright, next we need to get our headphone jack wire into the toy. So I'm going to drill a hole that's the same diameter of my headphone jack wire, and I'm going to fish that through there, and then we'll attach it to that other switch. Alright, I got my hole drilled. I'm going to fish my wire through there. And I'm basically going to do the same thing that I did with the other switch. I'm going to put a little bit of solder on my wire. Now I'm going to solder the wire to the switch. I'm going to give my wires just a little bit of a tug just to make sure that they're good and secure. It doesn't need to look pretty. As long as metal is touching metal and you don't have any like solder crossing over from one lead to the other, it should be fine. All right, now I'm going to stick this switch back into its housing. I wish they gave us a little bit more room here, but unfortunately they did not. I'm going to pull out a little bit of extra headphone jack that I don't need. And I'm going to attach a zip tie around the wire on the inside of the toy. That'll basically act like a barrier. So if a child were to yank on that cord, it doesn't just pull the whole thing out. All right, now I'm going to cut off the extra zip tie. And what I like to do for a little bit of extra security is I like to add a little CA glue or super glue around that zip tie. That just kind of helps lock everything in place. And if you have some, you can use some activator, and that will basically instantly dry that CA glue. Before we go ahead and put everything back together, it's a good idea to test and just make sure that everything is still going to work before we take the time to put it all back together. So I've got batteries plugged in, I've got our 3D printed mega switch plugged in, and I'm going to give it a press and just make sure that that feeding mechanism works. Here we go. There we go. So now that everything works, the task now is just to figure out where everything went and get it back together. A lot of these parts fell out as I was working on this project, so I'm gonna have to try to get creative and figure out where all this stuff goes. Wish me luck. All right, so it took me some time, but I think I've got everything back to where it needs to be. So if you need to pause the video and just kind of look and kind of figure out if parts came off on yours, where everything goes, you could do that. What's nice about how we wired this up is that this trigger is still gonna be functional when we're done. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this up, and we're gonna just reinstall all those screws, and then we should be done. Okay, so for some reason, some of these aren't screws. They're just holes that go into the toy. So I just dropped a screw in here. I'm gonna take everything all apart and get that screw out. But yeah, just make sure that where you're putting screws are actual screw holes. I don't know why there are these other holes in here, but I'm gonna take it apart. I won't bore you with me screwing everything back together. We'll just catch up here when I'm done. All right, so I got it all put back together. Let's give it one more test. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn on the flywheels. And let's see if the button works. There we go, we're all done. I mentioned early in this video that you could 3D print a mount for this blaster so it could sit on a table. I went ahead and designed one, and I'll put the files for it on our website if it's something that you're interested in. That way you don't need to use that big tripod. It can sit on a table and you can still swivel it around and fire. It's kind of nice that there's this little locking mechanism underneath here that you can turn off, and then you can change the angle of it. Or if you just want it to shoot kind of straight, you just lock that in place and then it can kind of stay put, and all you have to do, you don't have to really support the weight of it at all, which is nice. And you can have the button here and just kind of play and fire and stuff like that. So if you want to pick one of these up, the files are on our website. It's www.switchtoys.org. So if you liked this video or if you found it helpful, make sure you hit the like button and hit subscribe to stay up to date on all our latest videos. Switch Adapted Toys is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to make play possible for kids of all abilities. So check out our website at www.switchtoys.org. There we've got all of our how-to videos. We've got written manuals. We got files to 3D print your own switch button like this, our Mega Switch, and it's all completely free. So check that out. If you've got a group or an organization and you want to adapt toys kind of on a bigger scale for kids in your community, you could form what we call a switch chapter. And basically we help you walk you through that process of adapting toys, finding funding, acquiring toys. That we give you the skill sets needed to adapt toys and the resources to do that. Locally here in Columbia, we just had our volunteer day last weekend. We had 30 or 40 people come out and help us adapt toys. We probably had about 100 toys, 150 toys to adapt that were donated by another nonprofit here locally in Columbia called Pascal's Pals. And then later on in December, we're going to have a big giveaway event where families can come in and pick a couple toys. They can kind of shop around, find toys that are good for their kiddos, and it's all completely free of charge to them. So if that's something that you're interested in bringing to your community, you can find out more information on our website. Again, www.switchtoys.org. Lastly, if you're interested in a Switch adapted toy, but doing it yourself just isn't your thing, that is totally fine. We have a Etsy shop where we sell some pre-adapted toys that are ready to play with. So I'll adapt them for you, ship them out to you, and they'll be good to go. And all the proceeds go back into what we're trying to do here. So it's for a good cause. And we also have some t-shirts and some mugs if you want to support us in that way. And I'll put a link to our Etsy shop in the description below. Well, that's it. I'm Eric with Switch Adapted Toys, and we'll see you next time. This thing is so stinking cool.
Switch Adapted Toys, making play possible.